Welcome to this special edition of Reliability Matters. If you're listening to this episode as a podcast, a video version is also available on aqueoustech.com and on MikeKonrad.com. That's Konrad with a K. Today, I'm bringing in 4 of our industry's top consultants to speak about the pandemic, common technical issues, Internet of Things, and much more. My guests today are Jennie Hwang, Phil Zarrow, Bob Willis, and Ray Prasad. Jennie joins us from New York, Phil from Tennessee, Bob from England, and Ray from California. Now, here's my conversation with the experts. So welcome, everyone, to the Reliability Matters podcast, video style. We have Phil Zarrow and Jennie Hwang and Bob Willis and Ray Prasad with us. All of them experts in our industry, the electronic assembly industry. And I'm going to put a lot of pressure on them by calling them experts. And actually, Phil's the only expert that actually comes with a dog. I see your dog in the background there, Phil. Sleeping dog, yeah. So Phil and his magic dog, Duncan. Yeah. So thank you all for being my guests today. Let's start with the 800-pound virus in the room, COVID-19, with the pandemic severely restricting travel both to the factory and from the factory. Many companies are not conducting third-party preventative maintenance on their equipment. Also, with many technical conferences, workshops, and expos canceled, continuous education has been negatively impacted. So my question to our panel is, what are your recommendations for companies as the pandemic-related restrictions ease, or what are your recommendations if they don't ease? Let's start with Phil.
Wow. I get the story. I guess, wow, as they ease, boy, caught me here. I would say, among other things, whatever the new norm is going to be and when that's going to be as it evolves. One thing I think we all of us would advocate is that you keep up your training. And of course, a lot of times this is the first thing that's dropped. But now we certainly, everybody seems to adapting what Bob Willis adapted 2 years ago, the communication, teleteaching, things along those lines. And I always consider Bob the master of the webinar. But definitely, don't neglect your training budget at all. I think this was natural progress anyway, because I think one of the things we've all observed in the last number of years is this influx of new people entering into the industry. And newbies and don't have the years of experience that some of the older people that have retired or gone off or dare I say succumb to COVID have. So a lot of the older skills and everything. So that'd be the first thing that pops into my mind. Keep up your training, keep up your level. Don't skip on this stuff because it directly rolls down into quality and reliability.
Yeah, very good. Bob, I would imagine you're feeling pretty good right now, not having to learn all the digital stuff, at the last minute. You weren't thrown into the deep end of the pool at the same time everyone else was. You were swimming there several years ago. So I would imagine that is an advantage for you not having to, acquire those new skills and go through all the stuff that you see every day, every time we're on a webinar now. So what made you adapt that model before, there was actually a requirement to?
Well, to be perfectly honest, what actually happened is IMAPS in America were doing webinars, and this is probably 6-7 years ago, and they invited me to do a webinar. And so I did it, and it was about an hour and a half, and it was fun. I mean, it's just like talking to you. I mean, when you're trained to be a presenter or you're trained to be a DJ, as I was for a number of years, you're talking to one person. So it doesn't matter if there's one or 2,000 people in the audience. That'd be nice commercially. But the thing is that I think that it's learn the stuff, learn the software, whatever that might be. Also have a backup plan if something goes wrong. The things that you can't deal with is power cuts. So I was doing a live webinar to a conference in South Africa, and the power went out. So nothing I can do. That's it's really beyond my control. And vice versa. If I'm here, it's out of my control if we have a power cut or a power spike. But I think that it's just learn whatever the techniques are. Look at other webinars, because some of them are very good, some of them are abysmal. And particularly when people say they're going to send out the slides and send them out about 3 weeks later. As soon as you finish a webinar, the slides go out straight away. And the next thing that gets posted is obviously a video if you've recorded that. I mean, just do what you say. It's like any other business. Just do what you say. Say
what you do what you say. Yeah, very good. How about you, Jennie? How's your experience through this pandemic? Hopefully, I was going to say the end stages of the pandemic, but right as of the date of this recording, I don't know if we're at the beginning of the beginning or the middle of the beginning. Who knows? But how has your experience been? Has your business pivoted to a more digital model? Are you still able to provide the services that you provide?
Yeah. Well, first I echo what Phil and Bob already said. I think the online learning and through a lot of webinars, actually I have been swapped by all the webcasts either on both sides, either on the other side of the desk or being, delivering the webcast or being interviewed or listening and learning from all the different webinars within our industry and the outside industry. So I think it's a very good opportunity to really, get on the online learning. Basically, it's the self-learning, from whoever, any subject we are interested in. I think it's quite itself a learning process as well. It's how to really effectively do your self-learning and through the online learning platform. And the other thing I think is even we are not able to see each other as often as before, pre-pandemic, I think we wanted to keep the communication. Communication like now, we see our old friends here, and which is good, and through the email and through the telephone. I think that's also another communication and learning channel we don't want to ignore just because we're not seeing that. And also find that it's quite of effective in a way, but not, in certain ways. Certainly there's a lot of downside. We don't have an in-person interaction, but I think it's effective in the sense we save some time, able to emphasize on the knowledge. And I during this time, I feel even more so that the knowledge is really so important. Knowledge is the key. And in whatever we do, whatever business sector we are in, or any business function we are in, the last. But I do think that if we have an extensive meeting, the video conferencing, whichever the platform we use, it takes a little more of a time span. For example, the DoD meeting I had the last few weeks. We originally set up a 3-day meeting, in-person meeting. Now we had to spread to 4 days online like the video conferencing format. So it's mostly, if it's a very comprehensive one, perhaps it's not able to do the video conferencing just in person. So overall, I feel on the one hand there's some downside, but on the other, I think we are able to pick up a lot of learning and through the video platform.
Yeah, I would imagine, even though you went from maybe 2 days to 4 days because of the greater inefficiencies of digital mediums, you probably all in didn't spend any more time because you didn't have to travel anywhere. Because normally when you travel somewhere to see a customer, you go the day before, so you're rested, and then you leave the day after your business. Sometimes get delayed. So I would imagine you're still probably net neutral at that point, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yes, one of the guys you mentioned said, well, he said he kind of enjoyed it. He said, I could do the laundry in the meantime.
Right, exactly. You don't lose any bags either. Ray, how's your experience?
Just as a comment, if I may.
Sure, Bob.
Just to echo what Jennie has said, I certainly haven't done 4 days or 5-day meetings, but I did a 1-day IMAPS conference for them and just sat back and listened and did the technical things. And the survey afterwards was very interesting. The majority of people said, yes, they would like to continue doing this online meeting because it eliminated travel. But I think there was about 20% said, no, we like that social interaction. We like talking to different people because there's things you can do one-to-one, which you can't do as a group. So that was quite interesting and nice.
Yeah, and you pick up on the body language, on the nuances.
Right.
I know in service when I'm, back in the day when I used to go out and repair the machines that I sold, you could always tell if they were getting it or not, or if they're just trying to go home. In a sales environment, same thing. You got that one person in the back of the room that that's the block, right? So that's hard to see over a webcam. So, Ray, what's your experience like? Have you had to, and if so, have you been able to pivot to a more digital means of supporting your customers?
Yeah, first of all, let me echo, what my colleagues here said, that, and especially what Phil said about training, importance of training. There's a lot of reason for the defects, and quite a bit of that has to do with people. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to screw up 3 things today. So
I may question that. I don't know.
So the training is one area that I think the company should cut, or they tend to, and that part is important. And in my case, I think some of the things that I have been doing, some has changed, some has not changed. For example, I have had customers overseas, clients like in India for over a year. I had a client in Montana, of all the places, for 3 years. I never met these people before. This is well before COVID. So that was done, through the internet and email. And so that part hasn't changed. And I have never even seen them yet, and so that part hasn't. There's some of what I do obviously has changed. Like I had to go to a audit. Audit you can't really do online.
Yeah.
Some of it can be done that I do before, but I need to go there and see the operators and everybody else, talk to the people. So some of that has changed. So that has been postponed, but new things have come in because people, it's a lot cheaper in many ways. So net may be the same. One thing that definitely changed for me is I tend to do these in-depth classes like that last 3-4 days. And, 1 hour seminar, 2 hour seminar, we have been all doing for a long time. And that's this medium is good. I'm not 100% sure whether, and I'm still debating whether 4-day in-depth classes, should do that or not. I'm just trying to figure that out as to whether this medium is good for in-depth long classes. Maybe they can broken up, and maybe they should be, instead of being 3-4 days, they can be longer. So I'm not quite clear about that.
Yeah, we're all going to find out. We're all going to find out soon.
Better.
Yeah, we're all going to find out soon. SMTAI, the trade show that SMTA produces it's supposed to be in Chicago or I don't know where it is now, but that's been turned into a virtual event. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that happens.
Is that final that it's virtual now?
Yeah.
I thought there was a debate going.
No, there was a debate going, and the virtual side won, I guess. So I don't have any behind the curtain knowledge of that, but I do know that there was a debate going, and I do know that they decided to make it virtual, and it kind of makes more sense today than it did a couple of weeks ago, because we're hearing about all this resurgence of the virus and things like that, and then so they're going virtual. That'll be a an interesting experiment because they're going to put on a virtual exposition and conference. So that's going to be very interesting. And then the cleaning and coding conference, the high reliability cleaning and coding conference, which normally happens in November in Chicago. They were going to move it to Texas this year. That just canceled for the year with no virtual outcome. So it's going to go both ways. It's going to be interesting to see if we can keep
I think
several days worth of attention, on a screen.
Yeah. The one thing that I have some little bit inside knowledge, not quite inside, but the part of the IPC Expo, because through this Hall of Fame and this other committee things that we are doing and planning, there is a sort of backup for virtual, but the solid plan for Apex 2021 is still, in person. And so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
For the Apex.
I see arguments on both sides, so we'll see. We have one show that canceled, and we have one show that's going virtual, so we'll kind of see what works out.
Right. Yeah, IMAP so far, I think they still, as of today, and I'm aware of, they're still going as usual in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting.
We will see how that develops the next few weeks.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm a proponent of wearing masks in crowded areas, but I don't enjoy wearing masks in crowded areas. So, don't mistake my non-enjoyment for thinking that it's valuable. I do think it's valuable, but there's certain things I won't do if I have to wear a mask. I won't go there and not wear a mask. I will just not go there. So if I had to go to a trade show and wear a mask, if they enforce that, I would just rather not go. I don't want to go on a vacation to a resort if I have to wear a mask. I'd rather stay home and not wear a mask. So, so I think a lot of people kind of feel that way. And so even if they do have an event, if it still is socially distanced and precautioned and, all the medical things that you have to do, I don't know how many people will sign up for that. And then I don't know how many employers are going to let their employees get on an airplane, stay in a hotel, go to an event, in fear that they might come back with something and make matters worse for them. So it's definitely interesting times. Are there any pandemic related issues that you all see finding their way into the production floor? And by that I mean, by example, failures caused by lack of training or unstable workforces or unmaintained equipment, supply chain problems, things like that. Is any of that landing in your world?
Well, I think the fact that we're having to do things remote, as Ray mentioned, not being able to go on site and actually, as Ray and I both, get involved in a lot of process audits during the course of the year, and that's basically vaporized. We can't do it, and trying to do things remote, is challenging. It's doable. I looked into a client that is building respiratory equipment. And among everything, they are having to ramp up their production. They were doing a happy 350 units a month prior to the COVID. Now they have to probably go up to ramp up to like 10,000 units a month. And they're part of they're doing this through GM. And it's just like this is a happy little company. All of a sudden, greatness is forced upon them. And among everything else. My role with them has been, working with them, trying to ensure reliability. So again, doing it by remote, looking for remote testings of, for example, no clean fluxes, things along those lines, helping do no clean valuations. It's kind of just weird and challenging doing it remotely here, sort of arm's length. And so that's one of the challenges. And again, not being able to go on site with the new CEMs they brought on to do a process audit and really get into it. You're trying to get bits and pieces and snippets remotely. So, again, it's the challenge of maintaining reliability, from what we were so used to doing.
The two things that I've seen certainly increase over the last few weeks are PCB problems, either complex ones or very simple ones. There's certainly been an increase in that area. And much surprise to me, counterfeit components again. I mean, I was doing a lot of stuff with counterfeit components. If we go back, sort of 2 or 3 years ago when it was the in thing. And I produced, posters. I got a set of photos in my photo library and loads of sort of stuff like that. And I was surprised, to start getting orders for those things again. I thought, well, I just don't see an interest in this anymore. And 2 or 3 people have asked me to do, training courses specifically on identification as webinars on it, and how to do simple testing. And it's fairly easy to do because I've done it many times before. But I'm just surprised that. But then again, perhaps I shouldn't be surprised, because so many of the defects we have to solve, we've solved before, and before, and before.
We're going to get into that a little bit later. But yeah, I think that, well, that's music to all your ears, right? Thank God that what we learn from history is we don't learn from history. It's job security in many ways.
But it's surprising that people just. I know that we've got new people coming into the industry, but there are so many good sources of information. Obviously, there's textbooks, which it seems to me that a lot of younger engineers don't like reading, and don't seem to want to pick up a textbook. I know they're becoming very, very expensive, but there is a phenomenal resource out there from books. You've obviously got Ray, you've got Jennie's with her books, you've got Mr. Z with his brand new book coming out very soon.
Nice plug. Very good.
There's lots of good material.
Checks in the mail, Bob.
There's lots of good material out there. But the other frustrating thing that I work with one particular lab who is funded by their parent companies, and each one of the companies pays X amount of money a year to solve problems, and they keep getting called up about really stupid things where an engineer could go on the internet and find the information. And to me, I know that you've got to be wary sometimes of what you find on the internet and opinions, but where it's just basically referencing material and information, but sometimes people are just too lazy to do that, and that
right.
I just cannot understand it.
Right. Well, that's a human nature. Yeah, Jennie?
Right. Yeah, my experience, since the early March of the real impact on the manufacturer production floors was that initially consideration was whether needed to keep all the factories open if within the one company. Whether should shut down the certain factory and leave the open, so therefore simplify the overall the operation. And I think my advice to them was perhaps worthwhile mentioning was that I think when you close down factory, if you decide to select certain locations to be shut down, which is logical. And but it's not just a shutdown, turn off the switch. I think more important is to consider how you reopen, how you restart the operation, because a lot of things can be learned during the shutdown. During the normal time meaning the regular maintenance. So the factory would be shut down just for the regular certain maintenance. I think should go back to the record to see what really specific stations, specific equipment, a piece of equipment needed special care, and how to really make the shutdown effectively in the sense how you're going to reopen, and not just without problem, but reopen in a better condition. I think that's the quite a learning of a process during the shutdown. I think some operations seems taking that pretty well and made additional effort to close down certain factories with the consideration and with the effort to make sure reopen will be in a better condition for that particular production.
Sure. Don't just start where you left off, start further ahead, right?
That's right.
Ray, any comments on all this?
Well, in terms of the just long distance helping and so on with the new engineers, IPC has this program about what they call these emerging engineers. And they are trying to put together the people who are experienced and been in the industry for a long time with the engineers who are, been there for less than 5 years. and some mentoring program, and they have a formal program actually IPC has, and they even have, if they have, people can contact IPC to find the details as to how to get these companies connected with experts and so on for mentoring. So there are some new things being done in that area.
Yeah, I'm a mentor. Poor guy.
Yeah,
Poor guy. I feel sorry for my mentee.
Yeah.
But I am a mentor. I met him at the show earlier this year, and it's a great idea. I don't think I could offer technical expertise. I think he's probably ahead of the game there, but there are young people dropping into this industry, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that are educated. They understand how atoms move and electrons move and whatever, but they don't understand necessarily our industry and the peculiarities of our industry. Now that might be good, because naivety is a good way to, blank slate is arguably a good idea, but I like the whole concept of being able to be connected to someone who's been around the block a few times, who knows at least how the industry works and where the standards are kept and where the consultants can be found and all of that. I think that's a great idea.
Ray, I like to be mentored.
Yeah, so I think
I wanted to be.
Well, there we go. See, we're making connections. Here we go.
Yeah.
This is a consultant, meetup here. Let's talk about the Internet of Things, IoT. There seems to be an explosion of IoT-based technology. It seems everything is now a connected device. I have to believe, at least in some cases, that we're putting electronics inside things not because we need to, but because we can. It's a bit of just a gimmick in some cases. And many IoT devices are IPC Class 1 devices: connected toothbrushes, video games, headphones, key fobs, smart electric meters, connected refrigerators. And while many of these are arguably Class 1 devices, they may very well have to perform in harsh environments because we tend to take our electronics with us, requiring more like a Class 3 design. So what are your thoughts about IoT? Are we wasting energy and components and people's talents, or are these IoT products adding value to our life? Whoever wants to take that one, run with it.
Not at all. I think IoT is or becoming a part of doing business and running a manufacturing and maybe, our daily life. So it's really going to be essential. Some of the industries have done pretty well already in certain functions, but not, certainly holistically still remain to be evolved and developed. Actually, reportedly, the IoT devices, the growth of the devices already exceeded the smartphones. So as you can see, the role of IoT has been playing. But however, there are a lot of challenges still in order for IoT to be put into our industry. If our industry really wanted to reach today's, I don't think that we can take us a different meaning. But if we say Industry 4.0. If we really wanted to become an Industry 4.0 in our manufacturing, and then the IoT is indispensable.
Yeah, and we're going to get into 4.0 in just a few minutes. Any other comments about IoT? And if I wanted to build a connected pen that would warn me when the ink is about to run out. Certainly Class 1 device. No one's going to die if I don't get the warning. But then again, I'm going to put it in my pocket. I'm going to go outside in the snow and the rain and the heat and humidity, and maybe I'll take it diving, and it will fail because it's not a Class 3 device. It's a Class 1 device. It's designed not to live forever. So that's kind of the greater point is if we're going to connect everything, even things that aren't life-saving, that don't necessarily need high reliability, it's still not a good idea for this connected pen to fail 6 weeks, after I buy it for $35. So that's kind of the point I'm making is
but Mike, some of it is kind of silly, like this pen for the ink. I mean, the way we have the pen is cost few cents and whatever. I mean, some of it is gimmicks just to make a pen that should have been less than $1 in the first place. And you just throw it. I mean, why do you need to connect all this stuff? So there are some.
That's exactly the point I'm making is, why do we need a toothbrush that is connected to the internet? And there are today toothbrushes that can connect to the internet. So you can spy on little Johnny or Janie to see if they brush their teeth. That's kind of the point is we're connecting things that are silly.
Yeah, some of it's silly.
Some of it is great. Most of it is probably great, but there's a certain amount of stuff that's just, gimmicky.
I think, I agree with both Ray and Jennie. And on the one hand, as Jennie said, there's a lot of fantastic application enabling that we have. Perfect example. Here we are. Thanks to the Internet of Things. On the other hand, I don't need to tell Alexa to turn on my electric toothbrush. And, so it's, Ray saying it's technology for technology's sake. Like, why? And so in between those two extremes kind of lies, what's practical and everything else. But the other issue with the Internet of Things, I think, is it's more sociopolitical, but the loss of privacy. And I think it's also a generational thing. From our standpoint, I think we look at things being hacked, the disruptions we have, and the potential for disruption to technologies, and certainly, with our end of the industry. On the other hand, I have discussions with my 30-year-old stepdaughter and the proverbial millennial. They no qualms about loss of privacy or anything else. Alexa everywhere, social media everywhere. So it may be a generational perspective here as well, but probably. But I agree. There's a lot of really great enabling stuff. It's fantastic, but it's also a lot of technology for technology's sake.
Sure. I think the most important thing is, as has already been said, is that there is a limit, but there's not a limit in the imagination. So where the imagination can come up with ideas, then we can go in that direction.
Sure.
But all I would say is that I wish I'd actually registered the IoT, Internet of Things, and 4.0 to all the conference organizers, marketing companies, then I would have made a fortune without any technology whatsoever.
Sure.
I think that to me, connecting things together and taking valuable information and sharing it with another machine, another system, to me, as an engineer, seems obvious. Now, I know there are limitations, but that's up to the engineer to overcome those problems with getting the 4 or 5 companies in a room and talking to them. But unless we take advantage of that information, because there are so many AOI systems, SPI systems, the data's there, but nobody knows what to do with it. There's just too much of it. So again, engineers, and we must make sure the younger engineers go somewhere that perhaps some of their peers don't go on a regular basis. It's called the shop floor. And look at real things, not just the data, look at real things, because that's where you learn how problems actually can occur. And talk to the people who run the machines, because they're 24/7. Perhaps they don't understand about certain things, but they see a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I learned the concept of what we called MBWA, management by walking around. And it is amazing. As you said, Bob, talk to the people, because people have stories. They're desperate to share it with someone.
That's one of the key thing in the audit that I do. And, in the conference room, everybody just says the right thing because this is what they do. They're quality manager. He's used to talking to everybody. Oh, we do this. Yeah. And then I said, okay, so one of the requirements I have is that we talked earlier that I missed that can be done remotely. I tell people, okay, just leave me alone for a day, and I'm not going to interfere with production, but I do want to be able to talk to the people on the floor, to go talk around. It's amazing, the people who are following these things. Sometimes they have no idea what the guy in the conference room told me. Mm-hmm. And so, and they are the ones making the decision on the shop floor. So exactly, Bob is right. You just go on the floor. That's where you find out the real thing, because those are the guys making the decisions,
Yeah.
The best experience I can ever say is working in a plant in Texas. And I as Ray said, I was just left to wander around, look at anything I wanted to, ask anything I wanted to. And just directly after the audit, one of the important things that one of the supervisors said, "Can we have a recording of your voice?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you've got this strange accent. And all the girls on the shop floor love it."
Oh my goodness!
I had to do
Bob.
Anyway, slightly offline. But,
Charmer.
It's the English accent, I guess.
Now, if you call in the next 20 minutes, we'll cut Bob's voice to only 20 pounds for 6 words. Oh my goodness, that's funny. They just wanted to hear your voice, the soothing, calming voice of Bob Willis.
You charmer.
Well, see, now you're finding out industry secrets here.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, about the big umbrella of IoT, perhaps what apply to our industry will be under the subset of IIoT, which is industrial IoT, which is perhaps we are most more interested in. If we look at the industrial IoT, and then you mentioned about which we didn't respond yet, is about class 1, 2, 3 under the J standard, or under the IPC 610 or J standard 01. If you don't look at the industrial IoT, if I have to make a recommendation, and I would say I would not classify as a class 1. Mostly would be class 2 or some class, maybe class 3. Because once you're really looking into the IoT, implement into the system, and has quite a trickle-down effects, particularly when we linked into the 5G network, because that's really another big piece of the industrial IoT is really needed to function hand in hand with 5G. Now, once you're doing the wireless, the system become much more complex. Mm-hmm. So that hardware module, we look at our industry to produce the IoT modules, which is, for example, with RF, the power units, application processors, base station processor, all those components on this assembling. And then our reliability level has to be reached to a certain level. So I think based on the current existing for industry standards, if I will have to make recommendations, if people ask me, I would say it will be class 2 or class 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very good. Bob, going back to something you said earlier, and I think I didn't coin the phrase, I repeated a coined phrase, which is what we learn from history is we don't learn from history. What problems are you seeing, or is everyone seeing, on a perpetual basis? You alluded, Bob, that you're seeing some repeat problems just come back, some old problems come back. Are there specific types of problems that is there a common denominator that you all are seeing?
Well, I think that if I look at all the sort of defects that I look at, and it's a whole range. There's the standard outgassing, the long, boring discussion on voids. All those sort of things exist.
What's next?
But but the thing about what I see more problems with is failures to do with contamination, corrosion, dendrite formation, these sorts of things. And that's probably the main one that I see more often from customers these days. And what I wanted to do was just share a couple of examples with you, if I may. Right. So this is just an example of QFN LGA package, and what you can see by X-ray is dendrite formation underneath the package. So we haven't removed the package. You can just see the dendrites which are present. So this is a product failed in the field. Being manufactured by a contract manufacturer in another country. And, I looked at the material set and first of all, looked at the board as well and said, well, these have all been reworked. And of course, the contract manufacturer said, no, they've never been reworked. They're just as produced. So then what I did is, just as this is the Bob Willis simple way, I like to do the simple stuff. I can do the standard SIR and all that sort of wonderful stuff, but it costs a fortune to do. And obviously customer has to pay, but this is just a simple test. So basically I took a board, I reflowed the solder paste and did testing to try and generate any dendrites. And then I reworked the board with the rework flux using the right temperatures and times and durations. And when I did that combination of materials, you can see the effect. And what you're looking at here is a video clip just showing copper dendrite formation between two surfaces. You know, it's a standard dendrite video you've seen a million times. But the first one, no reaction. Add in the flux and rework, got a reaction, and consequently, you know, that's what we were able to demonstrate to this supplier. The thing about it is that, as I've said many times, and I'm sure all of you have, a picture's worth 1,000 words, a video's worth 1,000,000. And as long as you can, you know, say it's truthful and you've demonstrated it, then hopefully that will solve a problem. But again, sometimes you have to go to a laboratory because there may be some consequential damages and cost and liability after the event. But if you're just trying to solve a problem, try and do the simple stuff first, because that's the cheapest and quickest way.
Right.
You know, very nice. I mean, Bob, as you know, he's the master of the videos, and I have used with proper credit to him. You know, he has shared a lot of those generously. The point I want to make about the earlier question that you had, whether we see the repeat of the same thing over and over. I think if you look at bigger picture, we have been SMT in high volume, let's say, for over 3 decades. And the way I describe it is like 1985 when IBM came out with the 286 AT. That was my first computer for $5,000. That's without the hard drive.
At 4.7 megahertz of speed, right? A whopping 4.7.
And we didn't know the word giga, and then I got that for 5,000 at Intel discount, employee discount at 20%. That was 5,000. That's without the hard drive. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you look at that motherboard and the motherboard of today, the processes haven't changed. Of course, the pitches and size of components, they obviously have changed, but still we're doing the top side, bottom side mixed assembly. And you look at the defects, you know, then what they were, the overall, you know, what percent the yield that's there and what percent the yield is today. There is not a whole lot of change. You know, we are still the less than 10% of the companies have the yield over 90%. And there's some other data. We don't have the room in here in this in this podcast to discuss all the details. There are some studies, and there are certain kinds of defects that's always more than the other one. And that has not changed. For example, you know, IPC has this IPC 610, that's whole book, most popular book there is. And there are hundreds of kinds of defects. But at the end of the day, if you break it down, there are only 2 kinds of defects that matter. One is short and one is open. And everything else is, you know, is secondary actually. And that's how things fail. And other than, you know, the contamination and so on as well, that's Bob was sharing. But if you look at the defects, so the majority of the defects today, and then 30 years ago, they were all opens. And that's the same case today. And what we should be doing is majority of the defects should be shorts, not opens. And the reason for that is the shorts get caught. You know, they will not pass any test, in circuit, functional, you know, any test. Opens, they pass and escape and they get out in the field. And that's where reliability really matters. And so to answer your question, some things have not changed, even though we have made a lot of progress. And, you know, it's very easy for us to figure out how to make more shorts. I'm not saying go get a lot of shorts. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the ratio of the kind of defects that we get, and what is the desirable defect versus the non-desirable. I mean, they're all desirable, but I'm just talking about the overall ratio, which will be more serious. Open is a more of a serious defect that doesn't get caught, and the short is better because it gets caught, and you are the only, you will know, the customer will not know it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes
part
sense.
doesn't change.
Bob, thanks for sharing your screen on that. That's, that warms my heart because that's my business. But I have to be careful because sometimes, as it said, if all you have is a hammer, you see the world as a bed of nails. So I see everything as contaminated, so, but it is, I can take a step back emotionally and I can talk just, anecdotally and just from the number standpoint, clearly we are seeing more, contamination-related failure mechanisms as everyone switched to no clean. Not everyone, but most people switched to no clean 30 years ago, and the contract that we had with no clean at the time was we'll promise to keep things far apart, conductors far apart, and it promises not to be overly corrosive or conductive. And then we kind of broke the contract, and we started putting things really, really close together. So, and then, obviously, as I preach all the time, when you stop removing the flux, you stop removing everything. And I don't think the flux is the problem. I think it's the everything that's the problem. So we're seeing more of everything left on a board today. We need to kind of go either back to social distancing components to bring it into the modern vernacular, or remove, whatever residues are causing the trouble. That is certainly a cyclical problem. It just keeps coming back. It's like every December on CBS, they show The Wizard of Oz. It's the Wizard of Oz thing. It just keeps coming back. Phil, any input on that subject before we move on?
Well, no, it's interesting. Ray makes a very, very good point. It really comes back to the same fundamentals we had back in the early '80s. Shorts are opens, but then you translate it to, as Bob's saying, we have another type of short, dendritic growth, which has always existed, but it's become a little bit more prominent because of the majority of the industry using no clean. So it's just funny how these things evolve. Plus, as you mentioned, the density, the growing density of the boards. But I think, to Ray's point, everything old is new again. And then that's why Jennie's and Ray's Jennie and Ray's books will never be obsolete. So it's still good. How's that, Ray?
Just another point I wanted to make, if I may, is that I think that we would all agree, and hopefully we all agree, is that a lot of our customers that are subcontracting products just don't know how they're built. And if you have a failure in the field, trying to get information on how that product was built from your contractor, the specifics about materials, process, etc., is incredibly difficult to obtain, particularly when there's the possibility of lawsuits and money and consequential damages. Yeah. So, I always say to people that you don't have to understand the process when you're doing an audit. If you're visiting a supplier, just write down what he's doing, and do that when you do your MPI build. There is your reference, and that should be part of your contract. He should not be able to change anything. He can change it because he knows better than you, but as long as he tells you. And then when you have that recipe, you go back to the factory when you've got a problem and see if the recipe is the same. If the recipe has changed, you've got proof that he's changed the process without your permission. So consequently, he must be liable in some way. So gather information, and that will also help you with future audits. Even if you don't understand the process, you're just going through a check sheet, but it's a relevant check sheet because it's relevant to the materials being used.
Yeah, many of us, I know, Phil, you and I have spoken about being hired as expert witnesses. I'm guessing some of you have probably had the same fun experience. I was involved in a case defending a contract manufacturer from their OEM customer, and the OEM customer gave them a statement of work that was very poorly written, didn't reference any standards, and the product failed miserably. And the contract manufacturer, somewhat rightly, from a moral standpoint, said, look, we built exactly what you told us to build, and no more, no less. And we warned you when we said, when you asked us to skip a particular process, we sent you emails and we warned you, and you said, do it anyway. And then the product failed, and now we're being sued for tens of millions of dollars because the OEM said you should have not done it. You should not have done what we said. You should have known better. We relied on you, and you should have warned us louder and more frequently, and all of that. So there is a a very interesting relationship between OEMs and contract manufacturers. I find that if it's an OEM, they don't have a cleaning process, but as soon as they send it to a contract manufacturer, they not only have a cleaning process, they have a cleanliness standard, that they have to meet. Everything kind of rolls downhill, and it does land on a lot of contract manufacturers who are at the mercy of the statement of work, and they're bound to that, yet they're still held responsible for it. Have you guys had any relatable experiences like that?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Jean.
Okay. I found that the relationship between OEM and EMS varies in terms of both of contractually or non-contractually. I think it really depends on which OEM and which EMS. But that's in a normal situation. But once you get into any of liability issues, such as a product failure or liability going into the litigation, and then the situation change. So that will be the different way to deal with the defects, to deal with the product issues than without the litigation. So I found that that's quite a demarcation when we deal with the two different type of environment. And I want to go back to a little bit about the defects. I have a list of I think 45 of defects within the SMT arena, SMT manufacturing. And if you look carefully, I think Phil and Bob already alluded on that. You look very carefully, you try to see where there's a defects coming from, so many of them. Of course, some is more focused on the components, some focus on the PCB, some actually a lot of them, majority of them, directly, indirectly related to so-called solder or soldering. And if you just look at, I think Ray mentioned open joint and everything, it's still related to the solder, either materials, process, and different type of components coming from surface finish or cleaning and not cleaning, and the materials, the level of the so-called corrosivity or activity. So a lot related to that. Another, when I look at the defects would be, I try to put into the two different categories. One is really existing tin lead, the defects. And then very few, most of them still the same type of defects when we convert it to lead-free. And then you have a few newly introduced because conversion to the lead-free, specifically tin, silver, copper, and the solder alloy. So there are few because of that. And those defects, again, in a small percentage in terms of numbers, and which never happened in the tin lead. And so, for example, like pad quittering. In the tin lead, you hardly see any pad quittering issue, although that's intrinsic of a internal PCB issue, but it's related to really soldering environment as well. Then I think the defects which perhaps most alarming will be the insidious ones. Those ones we couldn't easily or readily detect during the routine inspection. Routine means we go through the module, inspection, X-ray. Sometimes we're not able to find it. Those are the really insidious ones. The defects I found it to be most alarming from the product performance point of view, and particularly in a very, very small number of the cases, getting into the liability issue. That means then eventually getting into the litigation. So that I think most consider to be most alarming.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Anyone else
I think also,
want to jump in?
Mike, to your point, there's going back to the CEM OEM relationship. The other disconnect there. If we go back to when all of us were, basically, if you go to the old days, the 80s, if you will, and, basically a lot of OEMs, 70s too, made their own equipment, made their own, everything else. Heck, there were even, hard to believe these days, but there were even OEMs that were fabricating their own boards, doing board fab. But ultimately, what we saw as things evolved, we went more and more outsourcing. And one of the evolutions we saw was that as the OEMs outsourced to CEMs, they basically found no need for their experienced technical personnel, and the emphasis on experience. That's what the CEM do. It's what I'm paying for. And a lot of them got rid of them. And then but the people they hired essentially to oversee, if you will, the CEMs were a lot of times right out of school or some other industry, but they had no experience building boards. As I like to say, what the four of us have, solder paste under our fingernails, so to speak. And by the way, what I said earlier about training, nothing replaces experience. And you can start off with good training. You get that experience, and experience builds on itself. So what happened is that you basically had people from the OEMs with virtually no experience, essentially writing herd and telling the CEMs what to do. And we coined a phrase for them. We call them popular mechanics engineers. In other words, everything they know is book learned, magazine learned, and now of course it's on the internet. And
now it's Google, Google engineers.
Internet, it must be true,
of course.
So that's another disconnect we see. Which, having worked as a CEM and working with, as all of us, with lots of CEMs, it's one of the most frustrating points is when the OEM has no idea what they're talking about, or very little idea, or worse yet, a misconception.
Yeah, one of the examples of the OEM not knowing what they're talking about is in their statement of work. They wanted the contract manufacturer to also get the boards fabricated, and under the type of material, this is verbatim. The description was down and dirty FR4, nothing special. In quotes, down and dirty FR. I looked up the slash sheets, and I don't think down and dirty was one of them. But you know what that did? It set for the jury. It set the intent. What was in their mind. Nothing special, down and dirty, cheap. So they can't say we were concerned about quality when we said down and dirty FR4, nothing special. So. Yeah, it's an interesting game. Anyone else want to add before we move on? All right.
I mean this thing about OEM and CEM, if you look at the very high point of view, 50,000 view, it fits in what just everybody said. The causes of the defects, there are three buckets, right? It doesn't matter what defect; they just fall into three buckets. What the design is, what the OEM does, and what's the quality of the incoming material, that's flux, what Jennie mentioned, solderability, components, PCB, everything that you buy, the paste, flux, things you buy. And then, the CM is responsible for the other bucket is the parts and pans and cooking and, what goes on in the manufacturing floor. So part of some of the legal things that happen is when the defects happens, two of those major causes of defects, like the incoming material quality and the design, is basically controlled by somebody else. And the CM is kind of responsible for the parts and pans and the cooking part. And but the defect is found there, so everybody thinks all the problem is caused in manufacturing, which is obviously that's where it's discovered. That doesn't mean that's where it all started. So, we have to keep in mind the root causes of things where they are, not where they are found.
Yeah, excellent. I had so many questions in addition to what we've asked, but clearly we don't have time for all of them. So, Bob, I'm very sorry to disappoint you. We're not going to jump into voiding. Sorry, Bob. Wipe the tear.
That dejected look.
And I wanted to get a little bit more into Industry 4.0, but hopefully we can guilt you or bribe you or blackmail you into coming back. But I do have one last kind of departing question, and it's very short. Consultants train their customers. Who trains the consultants? How do you get your continuing education on things? When you all first started, there were no such things as bottom terminated components. Now there are. How do you keep up Is it conferences? Is it other things? Someone throw some information out there.
Well, I think that
I would say that
I prefer wherever I can to try things out myself. I like to use these things, as Phil said. And I can remember back, when BGAs first came out, I looked at them, how much per part? So I thought, I'll make my own. So I made fiberglass BGAs, I balled them. So they were only 100 pin packages, they were 1 millimeter pitch. And I got criticized by both of the suppliers at that time of alternative parts, dummy parts, but they're not actual, they're not the right size. No, but they simulate the process. They give operators something to play with when they're doing rework and repair. And I did the same thing with LGA QFN when they very first came out. Quite big packages, but fundamentally still exactly the same process. And I've done the same with flip chip technology. Again, no, they're not made of silicon. They're made of very thin polyamide and fiberglass, but they were dirt cheap to produce. So it gave me the ability and pass on parts to other customers to play and learn. And so I think that learning yourself as much as you possibly can. The other thing is that if you look at a paper in a conference or you read something in a book, and if it doesn't quite gel, perhaps the point hasn't been written correctly or whatever, take that point and try it yourself. Does it actually make sense? Does it actually go wrong? Does it actually work superbly? The more you do from a practical standpoint, that's my personal way of doing things. I think that that is best. Again, it takes time, time's money, but that's the way I learn. Doing as much practical stuff as I possibly can.
When you are actively involved in writing and very actively participating, not just attending the meeting, maybe sharing or getting very active in industry organizations, you learn a lot as well. So so whereas somebody working at one company, they're just focused on one problem, but a consultant, if he's willing to work hard and participate and give his time, which is free, you're not getting paid for all those participation, you get more out of it than what you put in. So that's another way to keep up.
Jennie, any input there?
Sure. Simply put, I think it's a lot related to lifestyle and the mental drive. I think perhaps Bob and Ray alluded to, basically I just put in the simple words, it's a knowledge-driven lifestyle, one runs. Basically always with a very broad exposure and to absorb all the information. And all those information then will be whether it's activities or it's not physical activity. I think that'll really, the confluence of those become a real knowledge. I think it's kind of the person really, that leads to the mental drive, the how a person wanted to be. I think in order to be knowledge, with the knowledge, then with the excellence and the mental drive, I think that's how to get into the knowledge base. That's how you're able to provide the knowledge to other people, so-called a consultant. And so I would say that really the lifestyle, to really gaining the knowledge ahead of other people. In a space, of course, knowledge changes. As we know, the technologies, everything changes right now, changing faster and faster. So it's really had to be a little bit ahead of everybody else, and that's how you're able to provide other people, with the knowledge you have formulated. Knowledge is not something you just read get some data and read one article or attend a meeting. The knowledge is coming from the really confluence of all the things together, and then you have a lot of exposure, and then you formulate into the knowledge.
Yeah, I'm sure all of you share this. I don't know if it's an attribute or a curse, but I can't stand if I don't know something. If someone goes, "Hey, how does this work?" Almost 90% of the population can go, "I don't know," and we are probably in the group where we go, oh shoot, I don't know. And then it bugs you. It like plants this seed, and then I think we all have kind of insatiable curiosities. I used to get in trouble as a kid because I used to want to know how electrical things work. So I would take apart my parents' clock radio, or other radios, transistor radios. I would take apart TV, which looking back was actually back in those days quite dangerous. Just to try and figure out how things worked. Where I got in trouble was I didn't really have any desire to put things back together. So, there are all these half autopsied devices all over my parents' house. But that was before the internet. So you had to, as Bob said, you had to use your hands back then. But I think we all probably share that trait of not being satisfied, not knowing something when the answers are out there. Phil, any input on that? Who trains you?
These three guys. In all honesty, I think it was summed up really well. As Jenny said, sometimes we're maybe a page or two ahead of the client we're working with, and whose problem we're trying to solve. And other times it's like, oh, this is curious, as Bob said. Let's look into this and let's see it. But I would say a lot of it is just the challenges of the different applications and scenarios that we're thrown into, and I love it. I mean, to me, that's one of the best attributes of this particular profession, is that always learning something. I think I learn something new every week, and a lot of times it may be something like baptism by fire, like, oh wow, what's going on here? How are we going to solve this? But as Ray said, also Jenny, and certainly Bob, you pay attention to what's being spoken, what's coming out, both at the formal forums as well as just the general information, and filter through it, because it's there's a lot of stuff out there, and stuff in quotations there, and again, talking say almost regular conversation with Bob. Sometimes I'm always getting some really cool stuff from him, but or I'll have something I'm scratching my head on, and I'll throw it past Bob, or as well as some of my other colleagues at ITM. But I think one thing we all have in common is we love a challenge. We love something new. We've got to be constantly learning. I think that applies to all of us, if I can speak for all of us.
You must remember that most of our best work is done around a pool in Malaysia on a yearly basis.
With cigars, yes.
With cigars and drinks with umbrellas in them, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You don't even remember half the stuff you solved in that environment, I'm sure, right? So
I don't recall.
Well, I'll throw you guys a lot of compliments. Thank you. You are all contributors to our industry. You make our industry better through your knowledge, and you are also all competitors to each other. And yet there's this collegial atmosphere. So thank you for being agreeable to sharing the same screen with each other and with me, and Phil Zarrow and Jennie Hwang and Bob Willis and Ray Prasad. Thank you all for joining me. Just for our audience's sake, this webinar was, or this event was recorded on June 29th between the hours of 8 Pacific time AM and roughly about 9:30 Pacific time AM. So because we've taken up pretty much all the good consultants in our industry, or most of them, anything that was built during these times, I would avoid buying, because clearly manufacturers may have lost their way, not being able to get into contact with these great informative consultants over the last hour and a half or so. So thank you all very much for being my guest today on Reliability Matters, and thanks for agreeing to make our first video version of this. I'm so glad I could see your faces, and you feel closer to me and to our audience. So thank you all again. I'm going to put all of your contact information out on the show notes. So if you are watching this show on our website, there'll be contact information for everyone that's here. And if you're listening to this on a podcast version, audio only, you can go to our main podcast site, Spreaker.com, Spreaker.com. Look up the show, and all those show notes will be there with contact information. So thank you all again. I really appreciate your willingness and your your great insight to things going on in our industry. Hopefully we can do it again. Can we? At some point?
Absolutely.
Yes, sure.
Great. We got you. We got you on tape
Thank you,
saying
Mike.
yes. Yes.
It was fun.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stay well, stay sane.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Yes.
Stay safe
Bye-bye.
and stay sane.
Yes. Well, at least half of that. Right.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Well, that's another episode. Thanks for listening or watching the Reliability Matters podcast. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Reliability Matters on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. A special thanks to Circuits Assembly Magazine and Ascendo Reliability for syndicating this show, where you can listen to this and other interesting podcasts on PCBchat.com and reliability.fm. Thanks for your questions and episode suggestions. Please keep them coming. Send comments to mike@mikekonrad.com. That's Konrad with a K. Once again, thanks for listening and keep doing it right.
Thanks for listening to the Reliability Matters podcast. Join us on the second and fourth Tuesday of each month for new episodes of Reliability Matters.